Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for a Learning and Growing webinar promoting student engagement through critical reflection. Our presenter today is Dr. Monica Radu of Southeast Missouri State University. My name is Sidra, and I'll be your moderator today for Hawks Learning. We will have a live Q&A session after the presentation, so please enter any questions you have into the Q&A module as we go, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end. I'll now hand it over to our presenter.
All right, thank you very much. Go ahead and share my screen. All right. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. Like she said, my name is Dr. Monica Radu, and in this presentation, we're going to explore the importance of student engagement for active learning. So I'll discuss tips regarding ways to promote student engagement through critical reflection, because asking the right questions can help students make connections to course material and connections to their classmates, both of which help facilitate positive learning outcomes. So what is active learning? So active learning is an instructional approach that involves engaging students in the learning process through active participation, problem solving, critical thinking, and collaboration. It shifts the focus from passive listening and note-taking to active engagement and application of knowledge. So active learning can be implemented in both traditional and face-to-face classrooms and online environments, although the methods and tools differ. So here's how active learning manifests itself in both contexts. So in traditional face-to-face classroom-based active learning, you probably use these tools yourself, but group discussions are a great way to promote active learning. So students can actively participate in discussions, sharing their thoughts, perspectives, insights on a topic. They can ask their classmates questions, they can ask the instructor questions. It's a great way to promote active learning. Also, problem-solving activities tend to work well. Students can work individually or in groups to solve problems, analyze case studies, or complete hands-on activities. They can also participate in role-playing and simulations. Students can engage in these role-playing exercises that replicate real-world scenarios. So this can help them gain practical experience, apply theoretical concepts, and develop those decision-making skills that are so important. You may have heard of this before. Think, pair, share. Use this all the time. Students think individually about a question or a prompt. They pair up with a classmate to discuss their thoughts, and then they can share their ideas with a larger group. And then also, we know technology is always evolving, so you can use interactive technology tools, such as in-class polling systems, interactive whiteboards, or online platforms can be used where students can take quizzes, post real-time responses, and participate in interactive multimedia content. But what about online? Well, let's think about how we can do this active learning online. So online discussions are a great way. Students can participate in these discussions through boards or forums, sharing their thoughts, asking questions, responding to their peers' contributions, and this can encourage critical thinking, collaboration, and reflection. Also, students can collaborate virtually on group projects, utilizing communication tools, project management platforms. So again, this can promote teamwork, problem solving, and online collaboration skills, which again can be very valuable in the job market. There's online stimulations and virtual labs. There's lots of different multimedia resources that can be used, videos, interactive models, virtual tours. And then there's online, interactive quizzes that are becoming more popular in different online platforms. So in both classroom and online settings, active learning approaches encourage student engagement, critical thinking, problem solving, and collaborations. These methods, of course, may vary based on context of the classes that you teach, but the underlying principle remains the same: to involve students actively in the learning process and foster deeper understanding and retention of course material. So student engagement in higher education refers to the level of involvement, commitment, and motivation that students demonstrate towards their academic studies. So engaged students are those who actively participate in classroom discussions. They may seek out opportunities for extra learning extracurricular learning activities, maybe working on a research project with a professor. And we also see these students investing time and effort into their coursework. Engagement can be measured many different ways and through different indicators such as attendance, grades, participation in class discussions, completion of assignments, and involvement in activities maybe outside of class. So why is this important? So research has shown that higher levels of student engagement are associated with better academic performance, higher levels of retention and graduation, and increased satisfaction with the overall college experience. Engaged students are more likely to take ownership of their learning, develop critical thinking skills, and become confident and independent learners. Therefore, promoting student engagement in higher education is an important goal for all educators and institutions to help students reach their full potential. Okay, so what happens when students are not engaged? So when students are not engaged in their college courses, several negative consequences can arise. So poor academic performance, students having a difficult time doing well on assignments or assessments. Disconnection from the learning process. When students are not engaged, they may feel disconnected from the course content, their classmates, and the instructor. So this can really hinder their ability to connect concepts, ask questions, and actively participate in the class. And this often leads to a more passive learning experience. Also, we often see reduced motivation and just interest in the course altogether. Lack of engagement can lead to decreased motivation and interest in the subject matter, and students may feel just uninspired and disconnected from the value and relevance of the course, making it really challenging for them to find any motivation to learn. We often see limited participation and contribution when students aren't engaged in the course, and students often, miss opportunities for growth and development. So engaged students often benefit from, various opportunities available in college, such as networking, internship, research project, extracurricular activities. So when students are not engaged, they may miss out on these opportunities for personal and professional growth. So it's crucial for educational institutions and instructors to recognize and address signs of disengagement because we can offer support and try to implement strategies to re-engage students. So it's not too late. You have students who maybe aren't engaged with the class the first couple of weeks at midterm time, but it is possible to re-engage students. So student engagement online can look, very different from student engagement in face-to-face settings due to differences in format and delivery of the learning experience. So here are just a few things to consider. So the first is, communication. In an online learning environment, communication is often asynchronous, which means that students and instructors aren't interacting in real time. So this can make it challenging for students to ask questions and receive that immediate feedback that they may want, which can impact their engagement. Because in face-to-face settings, we know that students can ask a question and then receive that immediate feedback. So flexibility. So online learning offers students the flexibility to learn at their own pace and schedule, which can definitely be an advantage for some students. However, this flexibility can actually be challenging for some students to maintain that regular engagement in the course. So in online learning, self-motivation is really important because students are often required to take more responsibility for their own learning, and they may have to be more self-motivated than they need to be in their face-to-face courses. So this can be challenging for some students who may struggle with, time management or just that self-discipline. And technology. Online learning relies heavily, obviously, on technology, which can present challenges for some students who may not have reliable, access to internet or may just struggle with technical issues. In face-to-face settings, technology tends to be less of a factor, and students can focus more on the content of the course. So overall, student engagement online can be just as high as engagement in face-to-face settings if the course is well designed, the instructor is supportive and responsive, and students are motivated and actively participate in the learning experience. So how can we promote student engagement in online settings? It can be challenging, but there are several different strategies to think about. The first is creating that interactive learning environment, which can be done through a variety of multimedia resources, videos, simulations, interactive quizzes. Also, like I mentioned before, collaborative activities can be really helpful online. Um, there's always that, oh, we have to do a group project, but oftentimes those are the experiences that students learn and grow the most from. Also, one thing that's really important with online classes and getting and keeping students engaged is providing that timely and constructive feedback. So regularly providing feedback on students' assignments, discussions, or other assessments can really help students understand their progress in the course and understand areas for improvement, which can help motivate them to stay engaged. Always encouraging students to engage in active participation, which could be through quizzes, discussion boards. But also it's really important to foster a sense of community. So if there are group projects or there are discussion boards, how do we create that sense of community? How do we create this safe, inclusive environment where all students can feel like their ideas can be shared and are valued? And then finally, I want to talk more about critical reflection. So encourage students to reflect on their learning process, set goals, and assess their understanding. Self-assessment provides autonomy, responsibility, and active engagement in the learning process. And remember, the key to promoting student engagement in online settings is to create that dynamic and interactive learning environment. So next, I'll discuss more specifically how to use critical reflection as a way to promote student engagement. So reflection and critical reflection are both important elements in writing assignments, but they do differ in their level of depth and analysis. So reflection involves thinking about and analyzing one's own experiences, thoughts, and feelings related to a particular topic or experience, while a critical reflection goes deeper to analyze and evaluate those experiences and thoughts in a deeper, more analytical way. Also, we want to think about the purpose. The purpose of reflection is to gain insight into one's own experiences and learning, while the purpose of critical reflection is to analyze and evaluate these experiences in order to develop a deeper understanding and potentially identify areas for improvement. Reflection typically involves more of a descriptive analysis of one's experience, thoughts, and feelings, where critical reflection, on the other hand, involves a more analytical and evaluational analysis, examining the assumptions and biases that underline one's thinking, identifying the implications of one's ideas, and then what I think is one of the most important aspects is considering alternative perspectives. And also application. Reflection is often used to help students process their experiences and develop a deeper understanding of course material, where critical reflection is typically used to challenge those assumptions and biases and consider alternative perspectives, which in turn promotes deeper learning. So while both reflection and critical reflection involve thinking about and analyzing one's own experiences and learning, critical reflection involves a more in-depth and analytical analysis with the goal of promoting deeper learning and growth. So a critical reflection is a process of identifying, questioning, and assessing our deeply held assumptions about our knowledge, the way we perceive events and issues, our beliefs, feelings, and actions. So when you reflect critically, you use course material to examine your biases, maybe compare theories with current actions, search for causes and triggers, and identify problems at their core. So what I tell my students is, critical reflection is not just a reading assignment, it's not a summary assignment, and it's not an emotional outlet. Rather, the goal is to change your thinking about a subject and then maybe in turn, change your behaviors. So when writing a critical reflection, there's three perspectives I ask my students to consider. So the first is an academic perspective. How did the experience enhance your understanding of a concept, theory, or skill? Did you experience confirm your understanding or challenge it? Did you identify strengths or gaps in your knowledge? But a personal perspective is, why does this experience, why does this subject matter, this course material matter? What are the consequences? What were your previous expectations? Were they confirmed or refuted? What surprised you and why? And then last, the systems perspective. What were the sources of power and who benefited, who was or were harmed? What changes would you suggest? How does this experience help you understand the organization or system? So using questions or prompts can be a really effective way to help facilitate critical reflection in writing assignments. So I often start with open-ended questions, which encourage students to think deeply and analytically about their experiences and learning. For example, you might ask what surprised you about this experience, or how has your understanding of this topic evolved over time? Critical reflection often involves challenging assumptions and biases. So using prompts that encourage students to question their assumptions and biases can be really effective. For example, you might ask, what assumptions did you make about this topic or experiences? How did your biases influence your thinking? And then you can encourage, viewing those multiple perspectives. So use prompts that encourage students to consider alternative viewpoints. For example, how might someone with a different background or perspective view this topic or experience? What are the strengths and weaknesses of different approaches to this issue? And this is when you could also incorporate theories depending on your discipline or the course, but you could ask students to maybe compare and contrast the issue or the experience from different theories. Also can be really helpful to use prompts that link directly to course objectives or learning objectives. So it can really help students connect their reflections to course material. For example, you might ask, how does this experience relate to the first course objective or learning outcome? What did you learn from this experience that you can apply to other aspects of the course? And then also providing feedback is so important. So providing feedback on students' reflections can help promote further critical reflection. So asking follow-up questions. You said this. What did you mean by this? Could you give me an example? Could you expand on this idea? Or you can provide comments that challenge students to go deeper in their analysis or consider alternative perspectives. I see that you took the structural functionalist approach in your answer. How might a conflict theorist view this issue? So overall, using questions or prompts can be an effective way to facilitate critical reflection writing assignments, helping students to think more deeply and analytically about experiences and learning. So these are just some examples of questions that I've used. So what are the next steps now that you've learned this information? For example, what would you like to do, read, or learn more about? What are some of the similarities or differences between the material you learned in this module and other courses? So oftentimes, we have students taking multiple sociology courses or multiple criminal justice courses. So they might be taking a criminal justice and a sociology course. So this can be really helpful for students to make those connections. What did you learn from this model? And what will you take away from this module moving forward? How do these themes and ideas from this module relate to things you have learned about in or outside of the classroom? This is a great question that I found for my graduate students who are often working full time, so they can connect, what they're doing in the field with what we're learning about in class. What does this module have to do with you? How does it connect to other things that you've learned? So I teach many classes about social inequality, and people might start by saying, I didn't think this class or this module had anything to do with me, but here's how it did relate to myself or my experiences. Another question, did anything from this module challenge your own beliefs? How did you cope with learning this new information? So I always say, I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. I'm presenting you with the information. You view it from multiple perspectives. So sometimes students will say, of course, like, this didn't challenge anything, I agree. And sometimes people say, yeah, this doesn't align with my way of thinking, but this is still how I learned or I grew from learning this material. And then if you were going to, sorry, I got ahead of myself. If you were going to teach this module to other students, what would be the most important things you would want to point out and why? And this, of course, is just helpful as well to me as an instructor. It's helpful for students, but also, just understanding what were the main points, what were things that students really took away from the module, the course material can be helpful for both students and then myself teaching the course. So providing feedback is so important for critical reflection. So when providing feedback, it's important to really make sure that feedback is effective and also supports students' learning. So you can, clearly communicate the expectations and criteria for the critical reflection assignment at the beginning. So this includes the purpose, the format, the specific elements that you expect students to address in their reflections. Oftentimes I give an example of, this is my reflection about inequality. This is my critical reflection about inequality, to just show that difference right from the beginning, so students have an idea about the expectations. Also, focus on the process and depth of the reflection. So paying attention to the depth and quality of students' reflections rather than simply just evaluating the final product. So assess their ability to analyze, synthesize, and critically evaluate their experiences, thoughts, and learning outcomes. Also offering specific and again, constructive feedback is so important. So offering feedback that highlights both the strengths and areas of improvement for students. Point out specific examples or instances where they demonstrated effective critical thinking, or maybe where they could enhance their analysis. And as you probably know, it's so important to balance that praise and also the challenges. So acknowledge the positive aspects of students' reflections and, providing praise when it's due. I know it's the end of the semester and you want to get through grading as quickly as possible sometimes, but that part is so important too. Having students feel praised for the contributions, to the class discussion, to the active learning assignment. So of course, you also have to identify areas that require improvement and suggest strategies or resources that can help students enhance their critical reflection skills. For example, I thought it was great when you said this. Moving forward, I would have liked to see you add more depth to this. Great job showing connections between X and Y. What do X and Y mean to the major theme of this course or the theme of this learning objective? Can also prompt students to go beyond surface level descriptions and encourage them to analyze their experiences, connect their experiences to relevant theories or concepts, and again, consider alternative perspectives. So guide them to reflect on the implications and broader significance of their reflections. Also, it may be important to engage in one-on-one discussions. So if feasible, you could consider scheduling individual or even small group discussions to further discuss students' reflections and provide personalized feedback. I know it's becoming more common to do like videos can be really helpful too, to provide feedback to students rather than just written feedback. And then it's important to foster supportive and an open learning environment. So creating that safe and supportive environment where students feel comfortable sharing their reflections, but also receiving feedback. I always talk to my students at the beginning of the semester about the peer review process, that none of us are free from receiving other people's feedback. It's just part of the workforce, it's part of academia, it's part of growing as a learner to always get that feedback and try to move forward from it. So we can provide meaningful feedback that supports students' growth and development of critical thinking skills, ultimately enhancing their learning experience. So during this presentation, we explored the significance of student engagement in fostering active learning. So I shared strategies for promoting student engagement through critical reflection, emphasizing the role of asking relevant questions and establishing connections between course material and among classmates. So such connections play a vital role in facilitating positive learning outcomes and creating that safe, supportive, and inclusive learning environment for all students. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take questions at this time.
You can go ahead and drop your questions into either the Q&A module or the chat feature, whichever is easier for you. We do have a question. What types of classes have you used critical reflection questions in?
Oh, thank you. Great question. So I teach a lot of upper division sociology courses. And so right now I'm using critical reflection in my Invisible Families course, which is a course that looks specifically at the experiences of LGBTQ plus families. So for a lot of students, this is information they haven't learned about before. So asking students to critically reflect on course material has been really helpful in seeing their growth throughout the course of the semester.
Great, thank you. Have you found more success in some classes other than others?
Yes, definitely. But I also think that's partly because as I've used these critical reflection questions and discussion boards and forums, I have become better at explaining the assignment, explaining my expectations, providing feedback. So I can't put it all on the students or the classes. Part of it is, my own growth in using this. But I would say that, like I teach an introductory to sociology course, those students tend to struggle a little bit at the beginning with how to add depth to their reflections. So that's constantly what I'm saying in the feedback, that this is a really great point, but you just stopped short of really telling me what I wanted to hear. So then I might, add a little passage showing like, this is what you said, this is how you could have added depth to it and really showed how you were analyzing course material. So I've definitely had more luck in the graduate classes and the upper division courses than maybe that introductory course.
That makes sense. This next one is a comment. Thank you, great presentation, and all of this material relates to the importance of integrating of RSI policies. I agree with balancing the positive and negative commentary. I sometimes struggle with that.
Yeah, great comment. Thank you.
The next question we have is, would you say critical reflection is an integral part of the course or an occasional assignment?
Um, I would say it's a part of my courses. So it's something that they're doing. Like maybe there's 5 discussion boards, and that's part of it. Is they're going to start with, a paragraph that shows how they're critically reflecting about the topic or something specific within that module. Or maybe the essay questions will ask for students to critically reflect using certain prompts. So yeah, it becomes a part of the course, is we're going to really, critically reflect on this material. How does it affect us? How does it affect society? How will it affect us in the workforce? So great question.
Thank you. The next question we have is, how do you promote student engagement online?
So I primarily teach online, or I have the last few semesters, and I do discussion boards, and I tend to kind of go back and forth between informal discussion boards and formal discussion boards. Um, I had an instance a few years back where I felt like I asked a pretty informal question, and there were several instances where students plagiarized on the question. It's like, this was just a question asking your opinion. I mean, this was not something that, I felt that students would feel stressed out about, or that they would have to, plagiarize because they couldn't come up with an answer. So I talked to those students about, these are just informal questions, but I don't think I communicated that well enough at the beginning of the discussion forum. So I tend to, I might have one, a module where it's more just informal discussion, and then one where I'm asking them to take more of that academic perspective and to really, critically reflect on course material.
Thank you. The next question we have is, do the same strategies work for both online and face-to-face courses?
Yes, I think that many of the strategies work the same. Um, I've been trying something a little different in my face-to-face class this semester. I always ask students to jot down their ideas. So at the beginning, to get kind of a critical reflection going before we talk about it as a whole class, I'll say, hey, jot down some of your ideas. And people just sit there. Sometimes, it was hard to tell what students were doing, because I know people use their phones to take notes, but then that became kind of distracting. So there ended up to be a really, really simple solution. I went and got everybody a little 50-cent notebook. I just call it their critical reflection journal. I hand it out at the beginning of class. And so when I say, hey, jot down some ideas related to this, everybody jots, everybody writes it down, and then we'll talk about it, and then they'll jot down some more ideas. And so it was just interesting how something as simple as just providing everybody with a notebook really helped promote critical thinking.
That's awesome. Our next question is, in course evaluations, have the students commented that they enjoy the discussions and learn from them most?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, again, this is something that's improved over time. So at the beginning, I felt like when I started asking for these critical reflections, people were like, oh, that's so many sentences. Can't believe, I'm supposed to write these long, critical reflections in these discussion boards. But then I felt like I did a better job of explaining why, particularly in those online classes, where yes, maybe you could have just answered this question in 2 sentences, but we're not in a face-to-face setting where I can say, tell me more, give me an example. How have you seen this in your workplace or in your everyday life? So I feel like as I have gotten better at explaining, giving examples, providing feedback, I've gotten more and more positive comments about how students like the critical reflections.
Thank you. So what do you do if these students aren't engaged and they don't want to talk?
Oh gosh, that does happen all the time. So face to face, I feel like every time I go into class, I have a plan, a backup plan, and a backup plan. Um, so maybe I'm planning for it to be a large class discussion, and I tell them to get out those notebooks, jot down some ideas. Nobody's really participating, so I might say like, hey, let's get up and move around. Everybody stand up and go find one person to talk to from across the room. Let's stretch our legs and let's get talking that way. And so sometimes that works, just a quick shift. And so people are like, I don't want to get up, but then pretty soon everybody's talking, everybody's happy, and then we can come back to the group and talk about it. Or maybe I'll just shift and say, oh, we're going to do think, pair, share, or we'll do this a small group discussion, and then we'll come back as a larger group. So just being really flexible, and knowing that like this plan just might not work today. Sometimes if it's a really tough day, I might have like a backup plan of a little video to show about the topic to get the conversation started. So that's been, helpful, just like a 10-minute TED talk or something. Um, and sometimes, sorry, this is a long answer, I have to reevaluate my questions. So sometimes it's crickets in the classroom because my question's too confusing. Maybe I have essentially asked a 3-part question and people aren't really sure where to start. So sometimes just taking a step back and say, okay, let's just start with the first part of the question. What is, and then sometimes, taking that approach can help get the conversation started.
Thank you so much for that. Do you have any suggestions for incorporating more critical reflection in mathematics courses?
That's a great question. So I teach graduate statistics, and we have some discussion boards in that class. To really just try to create that environment where people feel supportive, but I can't say that I have ever used critical reflection in that course. I think I could, though, in thinking about how this information could be valuable moving forward. Um, you know, some students are excited to take a math class, maybe some are fearful and have a lot of anxiety. So, using critical reflection to kind of work through those feelings about statistics or other math courses could be helpful. That's a great question. Didn't see that one coming.
Thank you. Do you have any suggestions for managing uncomfortable silences as the
Oh,
discussion just kind of comes to a halt?
oh, that's great. Yeah. So first, I tend to tell students at the beginning of the semester that I am comfortable with uncomfortable silence. That if I do pause to let students think, it's okay. Like I'm not mad. I'm not up there, pouting because nobody will answer my questions. Sometimes people just need to stop and think for a minute. So sometimes if there is that uncomfortable silence and it's been going on for a while, that's especially when I might say, hey, let's just jot down 3 things that come to mind when you heard this question. Maybe the first thing that came to mind was, I have no idea what she's talking about. And that's okay. That can then lead to a better discussion or maybe backtracking in the lecture or something. So first, just like letting students have a moment to sit and think. And then I've just found that, just jotting and writing can really, help students, just take a minute and get their thoughts and their ideas together.
Thank you. We have a follow-up comment on the question for critical reflection in mathematics courses. April appreciates your answer. She didn't mean to put you on the spot, but she's used critical reflection to talk to students about math anxiety. We do have another comment. Alan uses reflection journals based off of regulated learning skills and mathematics self-efficacy skills. And that he uses the same questions that you mentioned today.
Very good.
Thank you. Do you have any closing remarks?
I just want to thank everybody for coming and for the opportunity to present. I think as I've made it clear in the question portion that I'm always growing, I'm always learning as a teacher and as an instructor. And so I just find these always so helpful to, get new ideas and, learn from one another because, that's what's most important, I think, is I tell my students that we all have to learn from each other, every semester, every course. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. And that looks like all the time we have for today for questions. Thank you, Dr. Radu, and thank you all for attending today. We will be emailing you a link to the recording of this webinar once it's available. If you or any of your fellow instructors are interested in presenting for our Learning and Growing webinar series, please submit your proposals to the Learning and Growing website, which I'm going to go ahead and link in the chat now for easy access. Oops. One second. There we go. Sorry, technical difficulties. All right. These free webinars are brought to you by Hawks Learning, an innovative educational courseware company. To learn more about our mastery-based course materials and how Hawks can enhance learning outcomes for you and your students, please visit hawkslearning.com. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. And thank you all for attending today's webinar.